within our corn and bean world, I've accepted that we're probably going to be in that for a little bit. Diversity is going to come. That's why the cover crops are so critical. That's why we're able to get that kind of benefit from that. We would get some there's benefit to just corn, bean, wheat rotation, or getting corn, beans, maybe try barley or something like that in the rotation. There'd be benefit from that, and I'm not against that. I'm just saying that right now our economic structure and infrastructure is set up for corn and soybeans, so diversity is more than likely going to come from the cover crops. So things that we have to understand about disturbance. We've talked a lot about disturbance as though the agricultural disturbances in general, the general statement is that they are generally antagonistic to those spheres of influence that I was just talking about, and are generally antagonistic to habitat for soil organisms. Okay, but we've mostly been saying that disturbance is just tillage. Okay, I'm going to throw a few things out there, and this is why I maybe I was trying to warm up and give my ag retailers a hug here before I went into this thing. There are other disturbances that can be antagonistic to our soil health strategies. Okay? There's physical, even overgrazing, that's a physical disturbance if we overgraze. It's kind of a biological and a physical and it fits into multiple things. There's chemical disturbance that can happen. I'm just going to tell you that there's plenty of literature that says that if you have a soil test phosphorus level of 600, you are going to have a very, very hard time establishing mycorrhizal colonization. Because when most mycorrhizal plants like corn have all the phosphorus that they want, they don't send out a signature, and they don't send out an exudate that triggers the colonization of some of those things. Okay, so more is not always better when it comes to some of our chemistry that's out there. Just what I call prophylactic use of some of our pesticides. You saw those little things crawling around in the video? They're all doing something for us. They're helping us break down residue. Springtails we talked about. When you really talk to the entomologists, a lot of the products that we're putting on that are just in case are wiping out those beneficial organisms. Yeah, they're knocking back the pest pressure, but they're also knocking back some of our beneficial organisms populations also. So we have to just be cognizant of that. These chemicals are extremely important to us, and we need them when we need them. But if we overuse anything like this, we could be setting ourselves up for a time that they're less of a value down the road, okay, where they just get taken away from us. And we don't want that. But there can be chemical disturbances, just like there can be physical disturbances. There can be biological disturbances. We're seeing biological disturbances across the Midwest right now with the fact that there's biological things coming in that are herbicide resistant, they're invasive species, there's things coming in that are major problems. And those are biological disturbances that set off the balance of what's going on in these functional groups. Okay? I'm actually, I'm on constant guard, even in our cover crop stuff, that we're real picky before we'll put a cover crop on to our cover crop standard in NRCS. I've actually got an invasive species committee that goes to. If I'm considering putting, let's say, a new one like sun hemp's kind of new. Before we put sun hemp on, sent that up to our invasive species task force that is actually a state committee that looks at weeds and looks at other things. It says, anything about this that you've got a major problem with or you see as a major problem, There's some of our brassicas, some of our mustards. They could cross up with some of the things that are already out there in the way of weeds and things, and we have to try our best. We're never going to be able to predict the future in every situation, but we've got to make sure that we're not just doing a knee-jerk reaction saying, yep, let's do that. But there can be biological disturbances to the overall, messes up the whole thing. Right now, one of our single biggest barriers to getting cover crops is Palmer amaranth. We just talked about it. What are we doing for Palmer amaranth? Man, throw all kinds of residual out there, make sure nothing's going to come up all summer long. Well, are you going to get a cover crop, nice diverse cover crop mix going if you had like SARE out there or Zidua or something like that? No, you're not. Okay, so anyway, these things, there's a lot of things that can interrupt this in our planning. This is part of our planning, is we need to understand that. Human nature is, when in doubt, you saw me the other day, when in doubt, get out the plow, right? Fix it now. And fix it now, a lot of times, the first thing we grab is iron. And there's a pretty significant amount of research right now that shows that yes, it fixes it in that moment, but in a very short period of time, that soil will not just go back, it will likely go back and be worse. One thing for sure you can be sure of, if you ran this to bust up compaction, the odds of you creating more compaction the next year has just gone up by about 50%. Because now you're going to get to go to the full depth with that axle load and cause compaction. Okay? So it's just, that's part of our drive, it's part of our plan. We need that as an understanding before we do this kind of planning. We have to understand that this does as good, we were in those pits today, this does as much deep ripping as anything, and leaves behind a biological signature that holds what you just busted up open and creates new airspace and new pockets without causing the fluff that lets the tractor drop to its axle next fall. Okay? So we have a way to fix problems biologically rather than that kind of strong urge to fix it now with iron. Okay? We have to understand in our planning process that the healthier our soil is, the more forgiving it is. And we hear this from folks like Dave Brandt and some people, and I'm not trying to tell everybody in here to go out and start planting in the head-high rye. But as they get farther along, they not only have their own personal confidence built up, but their soil gains a confidence in that it is now very forgiving, and you can plant through this, and maybe the seed didn't get absolutely placed where it has to be, but the soil is good enough that it's very forgiving, and you still get a crop, you still get a plant up, and you get things to happen that maybe otherwise wouldn't have happened. So the system is very forgiving, and the farther you get into it, the more you can get away with. And that's partly our mental confidence, but partly the soil gains a confidence for you too, in that it's very forgiving. Microorganisms with crop diversity. Something you need to know about diversity, the word diversity and biological diversity. We've got a microbiologist that's on our team now that's actually quite good. You had Jennifer here at your crop production meetings, right? Elliot, and kind of went over pretty, she did okay, possibly? Having these biologists join our team brings a wealth of knowledge that most of us in agronomy never got to enjoy before. And so she gave us, she says, now, we probably overused the word just flat out diversity. She says, we found that in the driest of all deserts, when they truly get under the true microscope and look, there's as much or more diversity there than there is in a healthy soil. That didn't make any sense. We were all destroyed, weren't we, Doug? Well, if you think about it, yeah, there's unbelievable species and DNA of diversity in that pretty much dead soil because it's all sitting there dormant. When you start getting healthy soil, those that are functionally beneficial and functionally important to the system rise to the top, so you have higher functional diversity, but not necessarily a total diversity improvement. But that's a hard thing for us to grasp, but it's the functional important groups that we're gaining diversity in. Doug, help me explain that.
No. One of the things we talked about at lunch was some different books, and in a book called Holistic Management, which is it's kind of a grazing book, but it also, coincidentally enough, it teaches 4 principles that are almost exactly the same as the principles that we teach. And I kind of like the term in it, a little different than diversity. It says community dynamics.
There you go.
And so it really is teaching that there's interactions between all the different things in that community, that soil community, the plant community. That it's not just diversity; it's the dynamics between all of the different things, and everything you do, doing one little thing, has a ripple effect and impacts all aspects of that community. And so I just like that term, community dynamics. It just helps me understand what diversity is a little bit.
Right. I just thought we needed to kind of talk about that, just because that's getting ready to set up for the point that if there's functional groups of biology in the soil, there's also functional plants that promote those functional groups. And so as we look at what plants we're kind of going to try to use as cover crops to achieve this diversity that we're after, we kind of have to understand that there's functional groups of diversity in the soil, so we need to look at the functional groups of plants in the crop rotation too. So if you grow more different kinds of plants in the same rotational period, that's our cover crops, we'll actually got data to support that we increase soil organic matter. When we do that, we break pest cycles and improve nutrient availability. Biology doesn't know there's 12 months in the year. Okay, biology changes in sometimes seconds, minutes, and hours. And so when you introduce something new into there, you're planting a cover crop, even for a short period of time, the biological benefit is great from that. Okay, so they sometimes you can break a pest cycle with a cover crop or a short season crop that you wouldn't otherwise think the idea is on. We got to do that a whole year, to break that pest cycle. But it's not always the case. We got to find those windows of management. We've got to change and plan for. It's like what we talked about, maybe a short season variety. I think I might have that here. But the key to success is the lack of severely limits what we're trying to accomplish here. And so the diversity above ground, what we see above ground is many times we can say that that's happening below ground. If we look for these niches, how are we going to get diversity? Then adding a crop like wheat, when you can get some extra diversity in there, like we saw today, that you've got to know what your absolute objective is. When a producer comes into your office, before you can plan any system with them, the very first thing that you should ask is, well, what is it you want this to do? Somebody comes in, they hear about cover crops, or they signed up for cover crops, or they want to sign up for cover crops. You've got to ask them right out of the gate, what is it you want that cover crop to do? If they tell you weed control, whole new set of what you're gonna recommend then, right? We talked about that earlier. That's way different than just scavenging nitrogen. 41 pounds of cereal rye will scavenge most of the nitrogen. That'll take care of most of that whole issue that we've talked about. From a water quality standpoint, we don't need much more than that, or any more than that, based on what we saw today. But if we're an organic producer and we're trying to control rain, whole new planning procedure that's got to come into effect. We've got to understand what is it that you want this to do, okay? And that has to be, We have in NRCS a planning process where we identify resource concerns, and that's usually thought of as we walk the land and identify the resource concerns. But part of it is, you gotta ask that producer, what are their expectations? What are they trying to get out of this? Jim?
I was gonna say the number one thing though needs to be, the number one thing we want to do is to work and live. So coming from northern Illinois, places farther up, see some guys come in and we're gonna sell cover crops. What do you want that ground to do? You want compaction, you want radishes. They don't understand everything that goes along with that. So we need to push that idea that a cover crop gets us a long ways compared to really fine tuning these things down when those other things don't work.
True. Yeah, first and foremost, you want it to live and survive and happen.
So I can people say I want compaction, so I don't want to do cereal rye. Well, I have to explain, cereal rye will help you with it. Yeah, it'd be great to do radishes, but just because we can't do radishes, don't give up the idea of a cover crop. Simply because we can't do what you thought.
Back to the, what are the shiny full-page ads that they've seen in the magazine? That's what they want.
Just a little qualifier, like using the cereal rye, we know it's a great nitrogen scavenger, but there also is a relationship to how much growth you can get to how much nitrogen is scavenged. So the earlier you can get it, I mean, it's got to work in the system, but if it's only that tall and you burn it down in the spring, you've done some good. You haven't scavenged too much.
Okay, and this comes back to what was I saying earlier is, the beauty of this whole planning process is the evaluation and making adjustments. And we've got to go out and look at this. How did that work? Did it do what we wanted it to do? And if not, we make adjustments in the planning process. When it comes to trying to get this diversity into the system, we think, oh my God, I just don't have very much time, but here's my annual grain crop. How can I, here's this window of ground, that's at the front end and the back end of my cropping season that's really a long period of time. If you think that really that corn crop starts senescing in August, it's not doing much new roots, whether it's corn or soybeans, from August on, and from August to November is a long time. Longer than we sometimes think that is to get that niche in there, to find a place for these crops to get some biodiversity. Okay, so this I forgot I had that slide that kind of shows that we can get now. A lot of you are saying out there, oh God, though, that's not much growth. That's not much growth. The thing that we forget about our annual crops is that this is a lot of top growth. But when we look at the roots, our cash crops are kind of puny when it comes to roots. We plant them in May, they grow through June. By early August, root growth pretty much stops because what's this thing designed to do? What do we breed it to do?
Make rain.
All energy is focused to making that ear, right? Same thing with almost all of our cash grains. So we're shutting down root growth. And it's hotter than blue blaze. That soil's now 100 degrees possibly. So there's not going to be much root activity or biological activity in the soil after that. So there it is. Beans, we wonder why we can't grow or build organic matter in a corn bean rotation. Look at the roots from soybeans. Not much happening. The other thing that stops, when the roots stop growing, nitrogen fixation stops growing too. This idea that beans give us a nitrogen credit is not really the case anymore. They just didn't have the carbon penalty that corn does, okay? So it's not really, we call it a nitrogen credit, but really it's not, it's just a non-carbon. Well, let's look at if we establish rye and hairy vetch though. Remember, we had just a little bit of growth at each end. It wasn't very much, wasn't very significant, but look at the roots. What happens on September to October? We're already surpassing what the soybeans were going to do. Then, guess what? It takes off growing again next spring, pretty early. Rye does. Look what happens if we let that grow to mid-May. We've almost doubled the root biomass of our cropping system. Why do we think that we build organic matter twice as fast when we add cover crops? It's in the roots.